The funny part is that China has borders with, I think, 12 or 13 countries, but China has border disputes with 23 countries. Uh, China has border disputes with countries twice removed from China. I mean, a border dispute with China does not. Normally, you would think that
Right.
a border dispute would be with your neighbor, uh, but you can't have a border dispute with two neighbors removed.
Yes.
Apparently China does, and China, being China, will try its best to push, do a little bit of military adventurism, but China does not have the appetite for war. China does not put boots on the ground like the Americans would. China would try and push you. China would try to use superior economic strength against you. And this is something that we must be prepared for. That this world that never spoke, countries never spoke to each other properly, and they had all sorts of disputes that put the disputes aside, and they're saying, no, uh, the real threat is China. Let's deal with it. And all countries are pooling in resources and sort of, countering China every step of the way, hitting China where it hurts, and it's not in the Himalayas or in the seas. They're hitting China's supply chains, because China gets its money from contract manufacturing. China gets its money from the United States of America and from Europe and from countries like India who buy Chinese goods. That is the engine that powers the Chinese economy, and what they are doing is hitting the supply chain resilience of the Chinese economy, and they're doing it in bits and pieces, and it's making an impact. Apple has started manufacturing phones in India. Samsung has got the largest phone manufacturing unit in India. There are so many Chinese companies, that have moved out to Thailand, to Indonesia, to so many other countries, and it's having an effect slowly and slowly. And over a period of time, I think we should be able to manage China. Unless we march in and we take it, or there is some diplomatic, blitzkrieg, this wound will continue to fester, because the rhetoric has been raised to such a level in Pakistan today that you know they don't worry about Pakistan so much as they worry about Kashmir.
Right.
Had they worried about Pakistan, it wouldn't have been in such a mess.
Yes.
They assumed falsely that when they invaded India, uh, Kashmiri Muslims would rise in revolt and support the Pakistanis. That never happened. No Kashmiri Muslim has ever, supported the Pakistan army whenever it tried to attack India. It hasn't happened in 75 years. Not one person did it, to the surprise of the Pakistani establishment, because there are things that they assume
Right.
that this is going to happen, and they base their war plans on these false assumptions. Now, look at 1971. Pakistan launches Operation Changiz Khan, and when it launches Changiz Khan, it attacks 11 Indian airfields, and India responds. And within 13 days, Bangladesh is created. Look at 1999. I draw your attention to General Pervez Musharraf's book called In the Line of Fire, in which he proudly claims that I send my boys across the line of control in Indian territory. I mean, here are Pakistani generals who, in their autobiography, are saying that, yes, hey, we are the best because we attacked India.
Right.
And yet, Pakistanis play the victim cards. Today, Pakistan says that we need an army, we need nuclear weapons because we are threatened by India. And the fact of the matter is, all these wars were started by Pakistan. And I'm not saying this is in India. I'm going to quote specific Pakistani generals who have written about it and proudly claimed that we wage jihad on India. Now, there is one Major General Akbar Khan. Akbar Khan writes a book called Raiders in Kashmir. And he proudly says that, yes, well, I led and directed the raiders in Kashmir in 1947-48. And hey, I'm the guy who did this. And he writes it in a book.
Namaste and welcome to Citti Media. My name is Bharadwaj. Today we have the distinguished pleasure of interviewing Major Gaurav Arya ji on our show. Major Gaurav Arya ji, welcome to the show. Major Gaurav Arya has had a long, distinguished career with the Indian Army. He served in the Kumaon Regiment. He's also had various stints in the corporate sector. He's now associated with a large media house in India and serves as their senior consulting editor for strategic affairs. He's also got a forum which talks about national political issues from the Indian perspective called the Chanakya Forum. Major Gaurav Arya ji, welcome to the show and thank you for all that you do for Dharma and Bharat.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me, Bhardwaj.
Thank you, Gaurav Aryaji. To start off, I just wanted to ask you about the general preparedness of the Indian Army. Ever since 2014, there's been a renewed vigor to make sure we have an integrated command. So, if you could elaborate a little bit on that.
Uh, First of all, thank you very much for having me on your show. It's a pleasure. Now, regarding after Prime Minister Modi came to power, a lot has happened, a lot has changed, and we have many firsts to our credit now. Apart from the introduction of the position of the CDS, which currently is lying vacant, but that they're looking for a suitable person to fill that role, is what I hear from the media. I would like to stress upon two things that have really made a difference. Number one, the procurement of weapons, and also on a focus on Make in India. Now, there are so many things for the Army, Navy, and the Air Force. The Navy is building more than 34 ships, including an aircraft carrier, including nuclear submarines, including frigates, including destroyers, all of them made in Indian docks. So that is number one, a very, very big deal. That's a huge deal for any country. It speaks about self-sufficiency in terms of naval assets, naval platforms. That is happening. In terms of air, I think Tejas has really taken flight. It's been accepted. We've also got those 36 Rafales. And there is a contract out for around 124, 126 aircraft, which I think in the next 1 year should get finalized. So all these things are happening side by side. There are so many other things in the Air Force, like we saw the introduction of large uh, lift capability aircraft. We've also seen the Chinook helicopters, and so much more in terms of missiles, etc., which is there, which everybody knows. As regards the Army, an introduction of the new battle rifle that's happened in the Army, and the introduction of new sniper rifles in the Army, and so many more things. I mean, I can go on and on and on. Also, the acceptance, large acceptance of Arjun tanks. There was a massive order
Right.
for I think two and a half, three regiments of Arjun tanks, which is also a very, very major order. Now, all these things are part of modernization. But the second thing, which is more exciting for me, more than modernization, is how the military has now been involved in what we call military diplomacy. While the army chiefs and the navy chiefs and the air chiefs always went abroad and met, today we see a greater urgency. So you'll have the army chief going and meeting the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, going to all these countries. Uh, and India is now willing to push the military diplomacy envelope. That is great news. The DAs, the defense attaches at various embassies, they have been energized and galvanized, and they're pushing Indian products in terms of telling friendly countries that why don't you buy the Tejas aircraft? Why don't you buy Indian tanks? Why don't you buy Indian weapon systems and all that? And also there is a certain, I would not like to use the word jointness, but because it has a totally different connotation, but I would like to say there is an understanding between, finally, it seems that there is an understanding between MOD and the Ministry of External Affairs, and they seem to be working in tandem, and also the office of the NSA, which has played a stellar role in terms of projection of our uh, foreign policy outside. With the recent example being the meeting of the NSAs in Dushanbe in Tajikistan, where they spoke about how we can sort of bring relief to Afghanistan, and also train their people and in anti-terrorism operations, etc. So this is a big deal, and what is happening? I think India is moving extremely fast, and they're moving together. That's the best part of it. There was a time when Ministry of External Affairs and MOD would move separately. They would have separate views. Now they're coming together very fast. I'm not saying there are only points of congruence and there is no dissonance. I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is that it's far, far better than before. And it's far more streamlined, and it's moving far faster. So I think overall it presents a rosy picture to every Indian. And I personally, as a veteran and as a student of geopolitics and foreign affairs, I'm heartened after seeing all this. I think we're moving in the right direction, and we're moving very fast.
Thank you for that, Major Ji. And as you rightly said, this is really interesting to see from the lens of someone who lives outside India. India is moving really quickly. There is a renewed vigor on having an integrated response. Even most of my colleagues who look at Indian affairs are now saying India seems to be, sort of growing and, stepping up to the plate of being a regional leader and a global power. So absolutely, it's refreshing to hear that and see that as well. So we're talking about modernization efforts. We're also talking about modernization efforts from a human resource perspective. We just recently launched the Agniveer uh, pathway for entry into the army. Could you talk a little about that, given that there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation about it?
First of all, I'd like to say that there are many veterans who don't think Agniveer is a good idea, and there are some veterans who feel it's a good idea. And this I'd like to say for the record that both of
Yep.
them come from a place of immense love for the army. Uh, Army people, Army, Navy, and Air Force, the armed forces generally tend to be extremely possessive about where they have served. It's for them. It's not like a job.
Right.
For them, it's not like a job. It's an entire, yeah, it's a calling. It's an entire life, and anything that happens they take it very seriously. They view it very seriously. So whether a veteran opposes Agnipath or supports Agnipath, they're doing it from a place of immense love and respect for the army and for the nation. That is number one. Number two, I think that all change is uncomfortable, especially so in the armed forces where we tend to be more traditional in our way of thinking. We tend to be more resistant to change, and wherever there has been change, and this is true for all armies, not just the Indian Armed Forces or all armed forces. I mean, look at what happened in the United States of America when they wanted to do jointness. The Army, Navy, and Air Force could not, bring themselves to operate together. It had to be done, by there was a proper this thing in the American Congress and the Senate, both the houses and everybody got together, and finally the president had to step in. This happened during Ronald Reagan's time in America, and then it had to be pushed from top.
Right.
So there will be resistance to change in any military. Now, overall, I think I'll tell you why. A lot of people have been saying that Agniveer is. There are 2 3 points here which I'd like to bring out, Bhardwaj. A lot
Sure.
of people are saying that Agniveer is not a good idea because what will the people do after 4 years? I think that has been largely settled by the government, number one. And the government has said that they will find jobs and there will be no unemployment after that, and they'll be well taken care of. They have announced reservations, and over a period of 3 4 months, I think it'll all get streamlined. People are already sitting and they're doing it, and announcements are being made, and it'll get streamlined on paper. That is one piece. Uh, but I'd also like to put in a word of caution here. The Army, the Navy, and the Air Force are not employment agencies.
Right.
You cannot demand employment in the armed forces the way you feel like. So there are two things here. First of all, what the aspirants want, people who want to join the armed forces, what do they want? And secondly, what do the armed forces want? The armed forces say that they want a younger army. The armed forces say that they want a lower pension bill. And even the United States of America, I'll just like to throw
Yeah.
some statistics here. India has an annual defense budget of 75 billion US, and the United States of America has an annual defense budget of 750 billion US, uh, 10 times more than India. And the US also has an Agnipath-like scheme. Why? Uh, I mean, if there is a country in the world that does not lack for money, it is the US of A.
Right.
But at the same time, you see, what has happened is, in our case, it is good to give a sentimental argument once in a while, for the largest common denominator, that national security comes at a cost. Of course, it comes at a cost. Everybody understands. And
Right.
who understands better than the soldier?
Right.
The problem is that our pensions are now, if our salaries are 100, the pensions are 125. So our pensions have become larger than our salaries. That is one statistic that I'd like to give. Over 65% of our total defense outlay goes in pensions and salaries. It becomes very difficult to have a modern army. Now, the straight answer to that, which many people would like to give, including many veterans, is just increase it. Increase the percentage of GDP that you maybe put it at 3% or 2.5%, 3% of your GDP on defense. But that is assuming that your growth will happen the way it is happening today.
Right.
There is assumed growth. You are not always going to grow at 7.5%, 8%. That's not going to happen. You will come down to 5%, and then everything will shrink. So you have to take a baseline approach that works long term. a simple back of the envelope calculation saying that make it 3% or make it 5%, that doesn't fly. Uh, Lastly, what I wanted to say was that Agniveer, I think, is a good scheme. And I think we have been very quick in judging it. Uh, we have been very quick in saying that it's not going to work. How do we know it's not going to work?
Right.
It's we haven't even put it, to the test. And there are so many other concerns. I think they'll be resolved one at a time. One important thing that people said that the regimentation will take a hit because a lot of our regiments are caste based and religion based. Like we have the Sikh regiment, the Garhwal regiment, the Gorkha Rifle, the Jat regiment, Maratha Light Infantry. So they are place based and caste based and religion based, etc. And that sure is cohesiveness. That lends itself to cohesiveness, and there is no doubt about it. And so I'm not saying that. But in my own regiment, I'm from the Kumaon regiment. Uh, by the name of the regiment, that is Kumaon, you could be led to believe that there are only Kumaonis in that regiment, but that's not true.
Right.
That's not true. Only 2 or 3 battalions, and we have, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 19 odd battalions, give or take one, because 14 Kumaon is now mechanized. One Kumaon is 3 para SF. So yeah, around 18 or 19 battalions, and out of them only 2 or 3 are pure. My unit is pure, 17 Kumaon. 3 Kumaon is pure, 100% Kumaoni, right? But other units are mixed. 13 Kumaon is an Ahir battalion.
Right.
It's not even a Kumaoni battalion at all. So it's all mix and match. You'll have South Indians in the Sikh regiment,
Right.
and that is the way it is in the Indian Army. So over a period of time, the Sikh regiment will remain Sikh only in name. The Kumaon regiment will remain Kumaoni only in name. The Gurkha Rifles will remain Gurkha only in name, and there is a certain history
Right.
which we need to be proud of because all these regiments have done fantastic work. But for anybody to say that it will dilute regimentation, I think we're sounding the death knell too soon. I think we should trust our systems, and I would personally say that we should trust our seniors. They are people with immense amount of experience, and they've done it. They've thought through, and let's give it a fair shot. Let's give it a fair shot.
Definitely, Major Ji. So you bring up a good point. We're trying new things. We're trying to modernize. We're trying to also reduce the age. We're trying to go for a more lean, mean, and agile army, and try to bring our units to be operationally more quickly deployed to the front and have a younger operating age so that we can be more effective. Something that Bipin Rawat ji, when he was alive, talked a lot about is the fact that Indian Army and the Indian Armed Forces are ready to wage a 2.5 front battle, right? So it kind of is pertinent for us to talk about the internal threats to India, where there is this ecosystem that likes to sort of push the reticence to change, to complain about change initiatives, whether it's in the government or in the army. Is there any way we can handle them? Like, how do we bring them into our fold and address those concerns?
I think this is not something that the army is equipped to do. The army is a force that generally likes to deploy kinetic measures. It's an offensive force. The Army, Navy, and the Air Force, these are not defensive either by equipment or by orientation. From the day you join the academy, there is a certain mindset that is you are exposed to, and there is a certain brotherhood that you're exposed to, and people who wear the uniform in the armed forces, Army, Navy, and Air Force, they're of a certain mindset.
Right.
I don't know about the internal threats and how the armed forces are going to be able to deal with it. Yes, they will, unless it's a sort of a kinetic threat. But actually, I'll tell you what. Most of the threats to India's internal security are not kinetic in nature.
Right.
If you're talking about terrorism in Kashmir, that can be dealt with, and the army, the JNK police, the CRPF, the BSF, they're dealing with it. So that is one piece. That is one piece. But and if you look at the red corridor where the Naxals are there, the CRPF is there, the Chhattisgarh police, the Telangana police, and everybody together, they're dealing with it, and I think they're doing a very, very fine job. Right from Bihar to Uttar Pradesh, also this entire red corridor, I think they're
Right.
doing a pretty fine job. The problem is the ecosystem. The problem is the ecosystem. There are people who teach in universities. There are people who teach in colleges. The kind of poison that is put in the minds of the young, that I do not think our armed forces are equipped to deal with because the mindset is different. Uh, I think what we need to do is first of all have a narrative in place. We don't have a narrative in place, and that is our biggest. shortcoming. You have political parties with media cells. Every single political party in India has a media cell. The smallest party in India will have a media cell. The government of India does not have an effective media cell, and that is what rankles. So the farm laws, right? And there was such a pushback. But here are two things about the farm laws. Number one, only 3.5 states objected. Nobody else objected.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure there are farmers in South India. I'm sure there are farmers in Bengal. I'm sure there are farmers in Kashmir. And I'm sure there are farmers in the West in Maharashtra. How come? How come out of 28 states and 8 union territories, it's only people in Punjab, in Haryana, some parts of Delhi in the periphery, and Western Uttar Pradesh had a problem? I don't know. I don't know why a farmer in Telangana had no problem, or why a farmer in Tamil Nadu had no problem. And they struggle equally. They struggle equally, and they have similar concerns. But they didn't object to it. Strategic communication is where we lack, and I think when we talk about internal security threats, one essential part of it is strategic communication. That is where we lack very seriously. And I don't think we lack for money. I think we lack for intent.
You're right.
Our intent is not there, and maybe we don't know how to do it, or we don't want to do it. And also, apart from this thing, like let's look at the CAA, the Citizenship Amendment Act. All it did was put a cutoff for 2014 and said that non-Muslim minorities in these three countries, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, would be invited and given Indian citizenship should they sort of, not invited, but should they choose to apply, and we will give them a discount in number of years that it takes to be accepted as an Indian citizen. It had nothing to do with Indian Muslims at all. This was meant for foreign citizens.
Right.
The CAA was essentially meant for foreigners. It was not meant for Indian Muslims. But there was Shaheen Bagh for such a long time. The roads were blocked, and miraculously, the day Donald Trump flew back, within 24 hours to 48 hours, Shaheen Bagh was over.
Right.
I don't know what it had to do with Donald Trump, but time and again, the hijab controversy, this Agnipath controversy, all these controversies. Today, nobody is talking about Agnipath.
Yep.
A couple of trains were burned, or a few trains were burnt. There was massive unrest again in a few states, not all. And then it suddenly disappeared the way it had come. Today, everybody's focusing on Maharashtra. Everybody's saying that who's going to form the government in Maharashtra, who's going to be the next president of India. Strategic communication, narrative building is something that we are not good at. We need to sort of, pick up the strings, right, from wherever they've been left on the ground, pick them up and get our act together. This is one of the main reasons why we let things go out of control. Farm laws were never explained. I asked a Pakistani friend, I mentioned in a video of mine, I asked a Pakistani friend, is hijab compulsory in Islam? And he told me that yes, it is. Then I asked him, all these Pakistani female television anchors, why do they appear? Yours is an Islamic country.
Yep.
Why do they appear on television without the hijab? Are they non-Muslims? He said, no, they're Muslims. I said, then see, just tell me, is it compulsory in Islam or no? Is it yes or is it no?
Yeah.
Like, for example, in Sikhism, for Sikh males, having a turban is compulsory. I'm sure there are Sikhs who do not wear the turban, who have cut their hair. But at the same time, it is compulsory by law, by Sikh law, it is compulsory. So I'm asking my Pakistani friend, can you please tell me, is hijab compulsory or not? And then he had nothing to say because obviously it was not.
You're right.
But there is no communication from our side, and we let things slide, and then we get bad press abroad, we get bad press in India, and everybody's saying, oh, India is this regressive society where everybody's out to, suppress minorities, etc., because you have no story to tell, and that storytelling must, that we must sort of invest in.
Definitely, Majorji. I think you bring up a very critical point, making sure that we're able to communicate to everyone in the country and set the narrative rather than having it set for us and combating it. Taking a step back, you've talked about, some of the internal challenges that we face. Moving to our West, Pakistan has been a persistent problem. We've talked about Imran Khan, you've talked about his government multiple times. And then, we've had this election where Mr. Shahbaz Sharif got elected. Lo behold, meet the new boss, same as the old boss when it comes to the narrative against India and Kashmir. What is your take on, how do we go from here? Because General Bajwa has expressed intent, or at least he's made a statement to say we need to settle our disputes with India.
I think all these are words, and while General Bajwa has been statesmanlike, but I won't put a lot of weight as far as all these statements are concerned, because there is a certain national mood in Pakistan. Pakistan has always defined itself as we who are not India,
Right.
and this has been from the day of its creation, 14th of August 1947. Pakistan has always defined itself as we, Pakistan, who are not India. So you see, what is the bone of contention here? It is Kashmir. It is terrorism which emanates from Pakistan into Kashmir and hinterland of India. We can talk about the Akshardham temples, the parliament attacks 2611, and there are hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of these attacks. I'm just naming a few.
Right.
The thing is that the reason for existence of the Pakistan army is India, and they will not allow this uh, friction to die down, because then Pakistan army will have no reason to exist.
Right.
You see, I just like to point out all these wars. Today, Pakistan says that we need an army, we need nuclear weapons because we are threatened by India. And the fact of the matter is, all these wars were started by Pakistan. And I'm not saying this is in India. I'm going to quote specific Pakistani uh, generals who have written about it and proudly claimed that we wage jihad on India. Now, there is one Major General Akbar Khan. Akbar Khan writes a book called Raiders in Kashmir. And he proudly says that, yes, well, I led and directed the raiders in Kashmir in 1947-48. And hey, I'm the guy who did this. And he writes it in a book. Okay. 1965, we fought a war with Pakistan. Pakistan invaded. There was Operation Gibraltar. General Ayub Khan was the army chief plus the president of Pakistan. And you should read his book, Friends Not Masters. Read the Pakistani army archives and chronicles, how they invaded, because they assumed falsely that when they invaded India, uh, Kashmiri Muslims would rise in revolt and support the Pakistanis. That never happened. No Kashmiri Muslim has ever, supported the Pakistan army whenever it tried to attack India. It hasn't happened in 75 years. Not one person did it, to the surprise of the Pakistani establishment, because there are things that they assume
Right.
that this is going to happen, and they base their war plans on these false assumptions. Now, look at 1971. Pakistan launches Operation Changiz Khan, and when it launches Changiz Khan, it attacks 11 Indian airfields, and India responds. And within 13 days, Bangladesh is created. Look at 1999. I draw your attention to General Pervez Musharraf's book called In the Line of Fire, in which he proudly claims that I send my boys across the line of control in Indian territory. I mean, here are Pakistani generals who, in their autobiography, are saying that, yes, hey, we are the best because we attacked India.
Right.
And yet, Pakistanis play the victim cards. I don't think they've developed the habit of reading. They don't read very much, I think. They should read their own generals, what their own generals have written in their books. And so this is a constant narrative. This is a constant narrative coming out of Pakistan. And I don't think this problem is going to be settled anytime soon, unless we take the initiative and the Indian army marches into PoK. This wound will fester for a very long time. I think the Indian army strolls into the 14 and 15 Corps, and even the 16 Corps, 14 Corps being Ladakh, 15 Corps Kashmir Valley, 16 Corps south of Pir Panjal, that entire Jammu region,
Jammu region. Yeah.
from Punch to Jammu, that entire belt. Unless we march in and we take it, or there is some diplomatic, blitzkrieg, this wound will continue to fester, because the rhetoric has been raised to such a level in Pakistan today that you know they don't worry about Pakistan so much as they worry about Kashmir.
Right.
Had they worried about Pakistan, it wouldn't have been in such a mess.
Yes. So you bring up a good point, Major G. You talked about how the narrative from Pakistan is mostly just narrative and there's no action. Moving our focus to the east, China's been dealt a death blow with Galwan, and their actions in Ladakh continue to be disingenuous. How do you see that threat playing out in the future?
I think this problem with China on the line of actual control, which is roughly 3,500 kilometers long and spans various states. It's in Ladakh, Arunachal Pradesh, Sikkim, Himachal, and Uttarakhand. I think this is going to continue for some time. It's not going to abate. Yes, we gave a solid response to the Chinese, but the Chinese are going to be there. They'll keep on pushing, and this is going to be there for some time. Remember, they have been doing it for a very long time. They did it before 1962, then in 62, then in 67, and it's been continuing every time it abates and then it comes up again. And the Chinese covet territories. The funny part is that China has borders with, I think, 12 or 13 countries, but China has border disputes with 23 countries. China has border disputes with countries twice removed from China. I mean, a border dispute with China does not. Normally, you would think that
Yes.
a border dispute would be with your neighbor, uh, but you can't have a border dispute with two neighbors removed.
Yes.
Apparently China does, and China being China will try its best to push, do a little bit of military adventurism, but China does not have the appetite for war. China does not put boots on the ground like the Americans would. China would try and push you. China would try to use superior economic strength against you, and this is something that we must be prepared for. Uh, there are two things that I'd like to mention, and what we must do, according to me, is be far more agile. I think while we are good and we have excellent equipment and more is coming in, we need to be more agile than the Chinese. We need to be faster than the Chinese. Uh, you see, that is one sure way to victory. And the second thing is we need to understand the power of hybrid warfare, of media management that China does very well. China has penetrated into the Indian media. China has penetrated into Indian systems. There is something called the Confucius Center in the Mumbai University. Uh, on the face of it, it's very benign. It teaches the Chinese language, it teaches Chinese culture. But what it also does is sort of bring in a deep seated sense of inferiority among the students, the Indians there, telling them how Chinese culture is superior. All this is war by other means. And these Confucius centers are not just in India, they're all over the world. And that is how China does it. So, China non kinetic means to achieve victory in the end. And it has largely to do with also currently, in the current scenario, the politics inside the CCP. What is happening in the Chinese Communist Party, and how it is incumbent upon Xi Jinping to project the strong man image to the local Chinese that, listen, India thinks it can be a global power. Here, we're sorting out India. Oh, America is, saying that China can't do this. We will do exactly that. So he's again doing what we call brinksmanship. I'm talking about Xi Jinping.
Right.
He's trying to push the envelope so far. It is this Chinese attitude that has led to the AUKUS, that has led to the Quad, that has led to so many other things with the world coming together. This world that never spoke, countries never spoke to each other properly, and there are all sorts of disputes that put the disputes aside, and they're saying, no, uh, the real threat is China. Let's deal with it. And all countries are pooling in resources and sort of, countering China every step of the way, hitting China where it hurts. And it's not in the Himalayas or in the seas. They're hitting China's supply chains, because China gets its money from contract manufacturing. China gets its money from the United States of America and from Europe and from countries like India who buy Chinese goods. That is the engine that powers the Chinese economy. And what they are doing is hitting the supply chain resilience of the Chinese economy. And they're doing it in bits and pieces, and it's making an impact. Apple has started manufacturing phones in India. Samsung has got the largest phone manufacturing unit in India. There are so many Chinese companies, that have moved out to Thailand, to Indonesia, to so many other countries, and it's having an effect slowly and slowly. And over a period of time, I think we should be able to manage China.
Definitely, Major Ji. You bring up a really good point. Sort of going up on that observation that you made, there's a focus here, at least in the West, that they're concerned with China's naval might. Right? China is the only armed forces that has an entire rocketry force dedicated to it. So they've also now been caught using merchant navy ships as front vessels to mask the military vessel. Right? So they have hidden canisters of rockets in in merchant ships. Is that something that we need to be worried about, or is there ways for us to track them?
See, first of all, you must appreciate what the Chinese are doing. Uh, the Chinese are very clear about what they want to do and how they will get there. So I think that is something that the world needs to learn. You can only have a strategy to fight an enemy when you understand the enemy. The beginning of all warfare is to understand the enemy. Once you understand the enemy, everything, and I don't want to call China an enemy because they are one of our largest trading partners. So
Right.
I use this word enemy very loosely, not specifically. I'm not saying China is an enemy. I'm saying that, or maybe we can use the word adversary here.
Right.
The thing is that China will do whatever it takes to get the job done. And in this world today, where you know old lines of honor and morality are blurred, right? And nothing is what it seems, and there is deception, and there is propaganda, and there is this use of media and social media to sort of rally everybody behind a certain narrative, which could well be fake. We don't know. We don't know. We don't know well enough. Uh, I think China has its finger on the button. China knows what it's doing. And this is something that we could learn. This is something that we could do. Understand what China does and have our own system. Speed is of the essence. China moves very fast. For its size, which is massive, China moves very fast. We are slow. Now we've picked up speed. There is no doubt that we have picked up speed, and we are also moving pretty fast. But then to counter China, you must move at twice the speed of China. Otherwise, you'll never be able to stop China. It's got simply too much money. And there is no democratic decision making in China. So if China comes to Ladakh, right, on the line of actual control, it's facing us in Ladakh, face to face. We are on this side of the LAC, China is on that side of the LAC, their own side of the LAC, and there is a face-off. In China, there is no dissonance. In China, there is a clear understanding that these are our national objectives, and this is how we get to them. Problem is in India, where 20 people will get up and start questioning, and you'll have a leader of the opposition party saying that, entire Ladakh has gone to the Chinese.
Right.
And this all comes under freedom of speech. And the Chinese are loving it, because can we blame the Chinese for this? No, we can't. This is a weakness in our own system. We cannot blame the Chinese for this. We cannot blame the Chinese for the fact that our own people are saying that Ladakh is gone. Once I heard Ladakh was gone, and I actually stepped out of my hotel to check. I said, what's happening? Because I was in Ladakh at that time and everything was normal. And I said, what in God's name is going on? Because everything seems normal here. People are going to work. People are going to their office. People are going to the market. And they said, no, Ladakh is gone. Ladakh is taken over by the Chinese. And it's a very simple thing. And in India, the problem is that when you speak, there are no consequences. As it should be in a democracy.
Right.
As it should be in a democracy. But at the same time, it is damaging to the national cause. And this happens more. You cannot tell people to shut up, because that would be wrong. You cannot say to people that, no, here is a government narrative and you have to toe the line. We are not North Korea. We are India. And people have every right to speak, even if they're speaking utter nonsense. But the thing is that your own narrative, the government's narrative, needs to be more powerful, more out there. And you can only destroy a narrative by a narrative. You can't destroy a narrative by telling people to shut up. It won't work.
Definitely, Major Ji. I think the strategic communication point that you raised earlier in the talk, that becomes far more important and far more pertinent. Sort of going off on that issue with China, China now seems to be getting ready to sort of invade Taiwan. They've been carrying out air drills. They've violated the Taiwanese air zone 23 times last month. They've sent ships up close. Do you think that that's something that will definitely play out, where they try to attack Taiwan and also maybe counter India on the eastern front?
I don't see. China has almost no natural resources when it comes to oil and gas, because China claims that, this is very interesting. China claims a large part of Russian territory, and it claims the parts of Russian territory, that have oil and gas. So China per se does not have oil and gas in its. So today, everybody thought that sanctions on Russia, Russia will buckle down. But the problem is Russia is selling oil at discounted prices.
Right.
To India, it's almost $40 to $50 a barrel, and which is a windfall for India as far as India is concerned. And in the month of May and June, the months, May and June, the Indian purchase of Russian oil and gas jumped up by 50 times, by 50 times. So India has taken advantage. Now, as far as China is concerned, and this whole Taiwan thing is concerned, I think China is again doing brinksmanship. I don't think China is in the mood for a China hasn't shown an appetite for war for a very long time. 1979, they went all the way to Vietnam and they got a thrashing of their lives. So I don't think war is dirty.
Right.
And Russians don't mind body bags coming home. That is the Russian mindset. Chinese are averse to, because I always say this, China is, we must understand China. A lot of Indians don't understand China. And I've written an article on this and I have thoughts on this, if I may say so. China is not afraid of the United States of America. It's not afraid of America's aircraft carriers. China is not afraid of India's legendary mountain divisions. It's not. Actually, it's not. China is afraid of the Chinese people. If something terrifies the Communist Party of China, it is the common Chinese. In their dreams, they would not want another Tiananmen Square, or a Hong Kong. This is something that China just cannot. Difference of opinion makes the Chinese Communist Party very, very uncomfortable. And I think they're not going to do anything unless they are 200% sure of victory and the diplomatic fallout. Because America has said, you move into Taiwan, there will be armed response. Joe Biden has been categorical, right? And if America has to defend its position in the world as the world's leader or as the world's policeman, they must be willing in the long run to put Marines in Taiwan, if it comes to that. And I think what is going to happen is that if China does anything in Taiwan, it will simply activate the AUKUS and the Quad. It will simply activate the AUKUS and the Quad. And I don't think Russia is. They said that it's a no-limit partnership. That's how the Chinese term their partnership with the Americans. But they also term their partnership with the Pakistanis as higher than the Himalayas and deeper than the oceans and sweeter than honey. And today Pakistan is burning and Chinese just say, okay, take $2.5 billion, don't disturb us, and give us twice the amount of money back in 4 years or 5 years. That is what the Chinese are doing. Alternatively, when Pakistan cannot pay, they're taking Pakistan's strategic assets, their airports, their ports, everything they're taken away. So what I'm trying to say is that I do not think it's going to be that simple for China to simply walk into Taiwan. It's not going to happen because, there are people in the US, in the State Department, in the Department of Defense, in the White House, with a certain Cold War mindset. These people have served in Vietnam. Some of the old guys, they've served in Vietnam, all right? And there are memories of Vietnam. And in America, Vietnam, I think in the last 100 years, what has really impacted American popular culture, American movies, or American way of thinking vis-a-vis the armed forces is Vietnam. Vietnam is right there in your face in the United States of America. It's a very huge part of what America is today. And they fail to realize that maybe as we speak today, all right, the world has changed. What America did was it started ignoring Russia for a long time. And they said, okay, hey, we're going to get out of Afghanistan. When America got out of Afghanistan, they did not know what Russia was planning. They had no idea that Russia was planning to move into Ukraine. But slowly and slowly, reports of, the CIA reports started coming out that Russia is moving troops towards the border and it's not an exercise. They will invade. Nobody took it seriously, but finally the Russians did invade. Now, here is point number one. Point number two is that there was a huge push by the world and at least people who support America or people who are part of this Quad Alliance or the AUKUS, saying that the Indo-Pacific is the next theater of war. And we need to shift our focus. And what is the Indo-Pacific? What is this entire Quad? What is the entire AUKUS? It is nothing but to contain China. We might say that Quad is 4 old guys sitting having coffee and talking about, giving free vaccines to the world. That's not true, actually. That's not true. Quad is an extremely powerful weapon. It's only India that has held back every other country from weaponizing the Quad, because India has relations with China also. But if push comes to shove, AUKUS is there. And the kind of naval assets in this war, the Navy is going to be, the deciding factor in this war with China. if a war happens, God forbid. And the Chinese Navy is not a patch on the American Navy. The U.S. Navy is simply, it's gigantic. It's like I don't know what to say about it. It's got 11 or 12 nuclear power aircraft carriers.
Right.
They're like floating cities, and they're no match for the American this thing. And even the Indian Navy, by the way, Indian Navy can give the Chinese Navy a very tough time any day, without any support from anybody. The Indian Navy is equally well armed. So we have focused in the past 5-7 years on our Navy. Unfortunately, we had neglected our Navy for a long time, which is something that was wrong. We neglected our Navy, but now I think the Navy has come again into the spotlight, and we are investing a lot in our Navy. And if the wars are going to be fought near the South China Sea or the Malacca Straits, if there is the AUKUS and the Quad, then I think China needs to worry, not Taiwan.
Definitely, Majorji. I think you make a really comprehensive argument as to why all these measures that US, India, Australia, UK are taking definitely keep China in check. I do want to go off on the same point that you raised. The war with Russia and Ukraine, it's a very concerning war. India is in this tough spot where we have friends on either side. We don't want to see war play out. But now there is a resounding call in the West and in Europe for peace. They're trying to make a negotiated settlement with both Russia and Ukraine. Can you talk a little bit about that, and how do you see that playing out?
See, of course, there should be peace, but I can tell you one thing. While India has been walking the diplomatic tightrope, as far as the Ukraine war is concerned, India has been amongst the biggest beneficiaries of this war. The rates at which India has purchased oil and gas and coal is it's almost like there's a sale going on.
Right.
50% discount, 60% discount. Grab everything that you can, and India has bought everything that it could. So that is one good part, but not to profiteer from war. That is not where I'm heading, and I'm not saying that necessarily this is the best thing to do. But countries do it for their own benefit. Bhardaji, what I think we need to look at is Europe's dependence on Russian oil and gas, and this is the argument that Dr. Jaishankar gave, that Europe thinks that its problems are the world's problems, but the world's problems are not Europe's problems. So what he's trying to say is that there is the sense of entitlement that Europeans have. You know, uh, India should not buy Russian oil, but we will continue to buy Russian oil. India should not buy Russian gas, but Russian gas will continue to power and heat European homes. You see, Russian coal is needed in Europe, but any other country cannot buy it. And we called out Europe's bluff, and I said that, and Dr. Jaishankar said, and I quote Dr. Jaishankar a lot of times during my talks, that, Europe needs to lead by example. And India did say that the amount of oil India buys, and this was, I think, in the month of April or something when he said it, that what India buys in a month from Russia in terms of oil, Europe buys in an afternoon.
Right.
So, so it's wrong for Europe to point fingers at India. Peace, yes, but then they must figure out a way. I think NATO is going to get re-energized, because now you cannot take the Russian threat for Russian. If the Russians are peaceful, you cannot this thing. And I think we are back to the Cold War spy games after this. What the Americans did was something wrong. It was strategically flawed. They stopped investing in intelligence inside Russia because they thought that Russia is broken up into so many pieces and there is no USSR, and now there is no big bad Russian bear. Suddenly Putin shows his fangs. So I think those days of the Cold War, you remember that famous novel, The Spy Who Came In Out of the Cold, or something like that. For The Spy Who Came In from the Cold. Yeah, all these cloak and dagger stuff. Now, America's you expect the CIA, expect the MI6 to make significant investments in human intelligence. We call it human HUMINT, actually. Yeah, HUMINT and SIGINT and EINT inside Russia. I think that's going to start again, and is going to fuel another sort of Cold War. Also, we will have, I think this will also result in a lot of investment in electrical vehicles. I think Europe will try to move away from fuel as fast as it can. I mean, there are targets, there are green targets, there are EV targets, And I think Europe, is especially Germany and France, they're going to have a very, very close look at all these things. That how soon can we achieve our targets? Because this has totally exposed Europe, this dependence on Russian oil and gas. I mean, Europe has never been so exposed in the past 50 years. And today, Europe can say whatever it wants. Russia is bad. Russia is the aggressor. Russia has invaded Ukraine. Of course, Russia is the aggressor. Of course, Russia has invaded Ukraine. But what are you going to do about it? You're still buying oil and gas from
Right.
Russia. You're condemning Russia and buying. You're condemning Russia in the morning, and in the afternoon there are truckloads of, fuel and gas. So the world can see through what Europe is saying today.
No, definitely, Major Ji. I think you bring up very interesting points. Like anyone who's a student of history will understand that, America played the strategic long game of investing in China, trying to foster democracy in China and trying to shore up their economy as a counterweight to Russia. And, we see that playing out in a completely different way in this day and age. There've also been talks about the great game that's still being played from way back, from the 1940s. And we see some of that impact here. I think one parting question I do want to ask is, we've talked about Russia, we've talked about China, we've talked about indigenization of the Indian Defense Forces. We still rely heavily on the Russians to supply our, I would say, impactful, armaments, right? Like the S-400 system. Russia has promised to deliver that on time. Do you see a future where we'll start developing these indigenously or through partnership with friendly allies like Israel?
No, absolutely, we're already doing it. The Akash systems are online. They are not nearly as good as the S400, and there is no comparison. The S400 is absolutely world class, right? Absolutely world class. So we cannot compare the Akash to S400. Having said that, India is already working on it. It's working with the United States, it's working with Israel, it's working with South Africa, it's working with so many countries in the world. Uh, the whole thing about Make in India, the whole thing about Make in India is to drastically cut down on imports, whether from Russia or from the United States. So let's say India says that, okay, for example, India says, I'm just giving an example. I'm not saying it's going to happen. This is a hypothetical scenario where India says that we buy 100 more Rafales. All right. So India buys 100 more Rafales. And what India does is ask for transfer of technology. Then India starts building Rafales and then starts exporting Rafales from India. So this is something that India is doing uh, in all the weapon systems that it's procuring, and some technology is developing indigenously, some with the help of friends, some it's purchasing. Over a period of time, we see absolute indigenization of all the weapon platforms, Army, Navy, and Air Force, and this is happening extremely aggressively in India. There are contracts that India had given which it has cancelled. You know, contracts given to foreign countries for supply of weapon platforms and equipment. India just cancelled them, and India said, "Okay, no problem. If we have a problem, we'll stay with that problem for a little while, but we're going to make this in India, and we are not going to import." So, I think S400 was required. It was an emergency measure. We required the S400, but having said that, I think most of the systems now in India in the next 5 years are going to be produced and made within India. And I think within the next 5 years, our imports, India was still very recently the top importer of weapon systems in the world. Now, I think Saudi Arabia is at number one, India is number two. Hopefully, in the next 2 years, you'll see India slide down to number three or number four, and then it'll keep on going down every single year because these targets have been given to our defense manufacturing industries directly by the Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi ji. He has given these targets, and he's personally, I'm told by various people that the Prime Minister's office is personally monitoring all this. The
It's
man does
great
not
to.
sleep, Bhargavji, the man does not sleep. I think the Prime Minister has insomnia. He sleeps for 4 hours every day or 3 hours every day. And he's just a workaholic, no holidays, no nothing. He's just on the job. So I think it's going to get done.
Definitely, Major Ji. And you bring up a great point. India should hopefully move away from being a net importer to a net exporter of armaments and become an expert. I think the one final parting question I have for you is, we talk a lot about drone systems and AI and like machine learning in the West. Um, there's capabilities that are being developed in India on this front. Anything that you see that's of interest where, there could be defense applications?
Absolutely. India is developing armed drones. Uh, India has ordered for a few Guardian drones and Predators from the US, but India is largely developing its own drones. There was this huge drone, it was a function where a lot of drone manufacturers from abroad in India were there, and the Prime Minister was there. And I think it happened in Kanpur or Gujarat or some other place, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember exactly, but yes, this again is being monitored very, very closely by the Prime Minister's office, because drones are the future. Drone, machine learning, AI, all these things are, they have got their foot on the accelerator. I mean, as we speak, there are hundreds of companies in India, who are working on drones. And, the best part is what Prime Minister Modi has said is that there is going to be a partnership with private players. So that takes care of the research and development. We had worked on a socialist model where everything was done by the government.
Right.
The research and development was done by the government. Today, they face, if somebody, and these legacy systems are what is holding India back. For example, if somebody wants to manufacture a gun, he wants to make a rifle, right? A private player, I'm talking about a private player. There are so many permissions required to get ammunition for a test firing range. It should not be a problem.
Right.
You can have accounting measures in place. It's very difficult. I've spoken to people who want to get into this space, but they're saying that there is so much of problems. But at the same time, the government is, streamlining measures, and I think a lot of private parties are coming into play. A lot of private parties are coming into play in India, started by Indians. There are people in Bangalore who are making sniper rifles. There are people in Uttar Pradesh who are making automatic rifles, and it's just going everywhere. Drones, you mentioned, yes, drones are a special focus, not just civilian drones, but also military drones. Drones with high endurance, high altitude capability, surveillance capability, uh, uh, weaponized drones that can carry missiles and stuff like that. So yeah, it's all happening in India. They're doing it.
I want to say a huge thank you to you, Major G. Thank you for spending your
No,
time with us this day, and
no,
thank
thank
you
you,
for all your
thank you,
responses. Namaste.
thank you, namaste, thank you.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net.